Hey, so I guess the first video that I wanted to do was a kind of mixture of everything that I have experienced through trying to conceive my pregnancy and the unexpected birth that I had with my son, and then kind of going into motherhood for me. This will probably have a couple of parts to this because I don't want to ramble and have a very, very long video. So I'll try and get the parts out as fast as I can. So to start out, I had a couple of issues. I wasn't sure if I had PCOS or endometriosis. I had a couple of different things going on. I had a couple of miscarriages, one being a chemical pregnancy, and I went to an urgent care, I'd say the very middle of January 2017, and I had a lot of pain. And of course I was afraid I had an ectopic pregnancy, but that's not what it was. I had a cyst on my ovary, which I'd never experienced before. And I guess they had done some levels to make sure, some tests to make sure that I did not have a pregnancy or possible miscarriage. And I was told I was not pregnant. I was supposed to follow up with my primary OBGYN to see if my cyst was going away, and that was that. So I went home, I took some pain medicine, I followed up with my OBGYN, and they did an ultrasound to check the size of the cyst. And when they did that, I don't know why, this is really strange, but the doctor asked me if I wanted to be pregnant. I said, well, yeah, I mean, I've been trying to get pregnant, I've had, miscarriage, so I would love to have a baby, even though it's not really seeming like it's going to happen for me. So she told me that my endometrial lining was really thick, and I was just being kind of odd about it. So I went home with this false hope or whatever it was, maybe she thinks that I'm pregnant, maybe my body's preparing for a pregnancy, maybe this is it. And I quickly let that go. About 2 weeks later, I had a follow-up with my main OBGYN, and to talk about taking Clomid. Now, if you're not familiar with Clomid, it is a pill that you take to help you ovulate when your body is not ovulating correctly or you're not ovulating at all. So I talked to him, and I just had this weird feeling. I was like, maybe I'm pregnant now. Is this going to hurt a pregnancy or anything like that? And he said, no, there's no possible way you're pregnant. He said, your body's not ovulating, and without ovulation you cannot get pregnant. But of course, because I was being prescribed this medication, there are certain tests and blood tests, including a blood HCG test that they had to perform to make sure that I wasn't pregnant, even though he just knew I wasn't pregnant. So he filled the prescription, and I went home. He told me, don't take the prescription until I call you tomorrow morning. Don't start it until we know for sure you're not pregnant, just in case. So I said, okay. I went home, I finished out my day, and the next morning he called me, and he said, you are pregnant. He said, I guess you are ovulating because you're pregnant. And he said that my levels were extremely low. He said that that I am pregnant, but don't get your hopes up. It's looking like you're either starting a miscarriage or you will be soon. He told me that my HCG levels were just incredibly low. So I immediately felt this overwhelming feeling of hope. I just knew that I knew that it was going to be okay. So I came in the next day to have my blood drawn again to see if my HCG levels were doubling, which would obviously say that I was pregnant with a healthy pregnancy. So I waited for those results, and the next day I got a phone call that my HCG levels went from 3.2 to 12, which was a good sign. So I had my blood drawn again. The next day I got the results that they were at 22 or something like that, and that everything was great. So from there I started to schedule my nurse appointments, my OB checkups, and that was that. Throughout my pregnancy, it was great. The first trimester, I was really sick. I wasn't able to eat very well. I had the typical morning sickness, well, all day sickness is what it really is. And I lost some weight. The doctor told me it was completely fine. I was already a little overweight anyway, so, whatever. I went through my pregnancy well. I started growing. The baby was great. He was doing really good. He was growing like he should be. Throughout my pregnancy, I was extremely concerned and terrified of a C-section. That was my biggest fear, was a C-section. And I would always ask my doctor, what's my chances of having a C-section, and just constantly obsessing over it. And he, I guess everybody does. I mean, it's scary thinking about having to deliver that way, I guess. It's terrifying to me. So I think I was about 36 weeks, I went in for one of my big ultrasounds. It wasn't my anatomy scan, but it was a hospital scan that I had to go to measure the size of the baby, because I felt like I was so miserable. I just couldn't, I don't know, I didn't know if it was normal how I was feeling. I just felt like I had a really big baby, and for some reason I was so obsessed over the C-section thing that I wanted to make sure that he wasn't too big to deliver vaginally. So my doctor scheduled to have another anatomy scan at the hospital, and I went in, and they said that my baby was, at 36 weeks, I think they measured him already over 8 pounds, and that I could probably be induced, closer to 37, 38 weeks to go ahead and have this baby, so he wasn't way too big to deliver. So my doctor agreed. He said, you don't have any medical issues, we can't induce you before 39 weeks, so we'll just schedule you for an induction at 39 weeks. So at 39 weeks, I went in to the hospital, I checked in, and I had, a Foley bulb inserted to start, to get everything going, and I wasn't dilated at all. My cervix was completely closed and far back and hard to reach. It was extremely painful getting the Foley bulb in, and it took a really long time. So it was a little traumatizing. They finally got it in, and I had not labor pains, it wasn't contractions, but they were cramps, and I'm assuming it wasn't really labor cramps that had started. It was just the whole getting the Foley bulb in was a big ordeal, and I think it caused a lot of irritation. Shortly after that, we waited. I didn't want my water broken. I wanted my water to break naturally, and I wanted to wait on that completely, because most of the time, once you have your water broken, either naturally or by a doctor, you're going to be on a time clock. You're going to have a 24-hour period before they want to do a C-section and want to get this baby out, because you can have an infection which can hurt you and baby. So I waited on the water breaking. I let things progress naturally as I could. They ended up, I think it was just 7-ish hours, and I started to feel really uncomfortable, and I felt like the Foley bulb was coming out. So they tugged on it and it came out, which meant that I was about 4 centimeters dilated. They checked me to make sure, and I was about 4 centimeters, between 4 and 5 centimeters dilated. And so they wanted to start Pitocin. I was okay with that because I wanted to get things going, but I didn't want my water broken, which can progress your labor, but it isn't something I wanted to do. I was not comfortable with it at all. This whole time I was taking no pain meds. I got a couple of shots of the pain medicine, but it didn't help me at all. It just made me kind of feel weird, but it was just incapacitating, if that makes sense. I wasn't able to really be myself. It just kind of got me woozy, but it didn't help with anything, so I could continue to get those. I didn't want an epidural. I had a tub in my room that was like for pain. So I mean, it was just like this big jacuzzi tub thing that I was using, but every time I would get in it, it would just stop my labor, and it was just discouraging, you know. So I decided to stay out of that. I started walking in the halls a little bit. Things were picking up, and it was extremely painful. Obviously, that's what labor is. It's the most painful thing a woman can endure, I'm sure. So I walked and walked. I had a doula come in. It was so nice. My husband was just so tired. My labor was so long. You know, everybody was asleep, and I didn't want to disturb anyone, but I was laboring, and I needed someone. So the hospital actually called a volunteer doula, and she drove over, and it was just absolutely wonderful. By that time, before she got there, I had decided, you know, I'm getting tired of this, and I'm not really progressing very well, so let's go ahead and break my water. They broke my water, and oh my gosh, shortly after that, I was just going. I was in full-blown active labor, and I was in so much pain that I could not deal at all. Yeah, I went a little while on the ball, rocking back and forth. I had my doula there. She lit some candles around my room. It was really nice. We walked a little bit, talked, and it got to a point where I just wanted my husband, and I sent the doula home because I was just so uncomfortable, and I just felt